Officers for Mayor Cantrell clocking hundreds of hours and getting paid thousands of dollars in taxpayer money.
But we combed through piles of records and found for many hours the officers were nowhere near the mayor, at times not even in the same state. In our newest Outside the Office investigation, new questions about what the officers are doing to earn that money and calls for a complete overhaul of the mayor's security team. 6:27 at night, Wednesday, September 7th. Mayor Cantrell arrived at the city's Upper Pontalba apartment. Minutes later, there she is on the balcony talking to NOPD officer Jeffrey Vappy. Vappy and the mayor spent the next few hours inside the apartment. At this exact minute, taxpayers were paying 3 NOPD officers to protect the mayor.
It's an abuse of authority. It's a waste of public funds.
Rewind the camera to that morning. The mayor arrived at 7:34 and left about an hour later in workout clothes, walking alone. At 9:11, she returned without police protection, then watered plants on the balcony. She finally left the city-owned apartment at 11:04, 4 minutes after her first scheduled meeting of the day was supposed to start. But that morning, 4 law enforcement officers went on the clock. According to the NOPD, their sole job, to protect the mayor. NOPD officer Robert Monlin started his workday at 6:25 a.m. Orleans Sheriff Deputy Charles Ellis at 7 a.m. NOPD officer Jeffrey Vappy at 8, then another NOPD officer, Luis Martinez, at 9. 4 officers being paid by taxpayers to protect the mayor, while we spotted her walking alone in workout clothes, watering plants, and leaving the city-owned apartment by herself just after 11 o'clock.
That inherently doesn't make sense to me.
For that day, the city decided to pay officers to protect the mayor for 48 total hours of work. Ellis, the sheriff's deputy, worked 7 until 3. Vappy, 8 in the morning until 8 at night. Martinez, 9 until 9. And Monlin, 6:25 a.m. until 11 at night.
And this is what screamed at me, is that this is absolutely not a great use of resources. And it's not, it is extremely difficult to explain how you could have 4 officers dedicated the same period of time when the mayor is not very busy that day. And what would these officers possibly be doing?
Let's go back to the night of September 7th. Vappy arrived at 5:15. The mayor more than an hour later. The 2 stayed at the Pontalba until after 11. So while Vappy and Cantrell spent time inside the city-owned apartment, the city paid 2 additional security officers to protect the mayor. Luis Martinez until 9 at night and Robert Monlin, who went off the clock at 11. Minutes before the mayor left the apartment and walked alone to her SUV. The city won't detail what these officers do while on the clock. Findings like this led NOPD watchdog and private citizen Skip Gallagher to file complaints against the officers. He wonders if they're working and what they're doing during these paid hours.
And this is why I filed a complaint. Hopefully this will be investigated thoroughly and they will find out where these officers were, what they were doing.
We reviewed more than 1,000 hours of video from a public security camera outside the city-owned French Quarter apartment and inspected hundreds of pages of payroll records and the mayor's schedule. What we found, the city paying NOPD officers to protect the mayor, but those officers spending many of those hours nowhere close to her. According to the NOPD, these officers are assigned full-time to provide security for the mayor, and they don't perform any other duties for the police department. A spokesperson writing they are always assigned to the mayor's security detail. Monday, August 22nd of last year, Mayor Cantrell spent the entire day in Washington, D.C. for one meeting with the Department of Justice. Officer Jeffrey Vappy was the only security listed on her schedule that day and traveled to D.C. with the mayor. But back in New Orleans, the city still paid 2 additional officers to protect the mayor while she was in D.C., more than 1,000 miles away. Robert Monlin clocked in at 8 a.m. and worked until 8 at night. Deputy Charles Ellis from 10 in the morning until 10 at night. Remember, the NOPD says their only duty is to protect the mayor, yet both billed taxpayers for a total of 24 hours of work, while the person they're paid to protect was out of town.
So I think this is a question we have to ask, whether or not this is the optimal use of crime fighters of crime-fighting resources, of people trained to be crime fighters.
Vappy has been removed from the mayor's security team following our stories of possible payroll fraud and an improper relationship with the mayor. Ellis, the deputy, retired on January 31st of this year. Mondlin and Martinez remain on her security team. According to former Mayor Mitch Landrieu's calendar, each day one security officer was assigned to protect him. For Mayor Cantrell, many days it's 4.
We want the mayor to be safe. We want the mayor to be protected. We want the mayor to have security. That's not the issue here. But I think the question is, what amount of security is necessary to protect the mayor?
Dillard political analyst Robert Collins says providing executive protection is different than policing and says with a force that has fewer than 1,000 officers, outsourcing the mayor's security might make the most sense. The city won't tell us who sets these officers' schedules. The NOPD says an unnamed sergeant signs off on the timesheets. From our analysis of the timesheets, it's hard to determine who has final approval.
So here we have public employees. Apparently they have a supervisor somewhere who's a sergeant who's signing off on these timesheets. We don't know who this supervisor is because it's a secret supervisor. It's almost like, are they the CIA? Are they an intelligence agency? You know, why don't we know who's signing off on these timesheets?
Saturday, October 1st, the mayor's calendar had only one public event, a Citizens Police Academy graduation at noon. Only 2 officers, Robert Mondlin and Luis Martinez, were on her schedule that Saturday. Yet 3 of her security officers clocked at least 12 hours of work. Jeffrey Vappy wasn't even listed as her security on duty that day, but he went on the clock first at 5 a.m. It's unclear why taxpayers needed to pay him before the sun came up. On his timesheet, Vappy claims he worked a 15-hour day, working until 8 at night. Robert Mondlin from 7 a.m. until 11 at night. Luis Martinez 9 in the morning until 9 at night. All totaled 43 hours of security detail, all for one Saturday in the fall with one scheduled public appearance. Here's another date, Tuesday, September 13th. Mayor Cantrell arrived back at the French Quarter apartment just after 5 p.m. She arrived alone, no security, nobody watching her walk from the car to the entrance. Yet at that exact time, taxpayers paid 4 officers to protect the mayor. One of those officers, Jeffrey Vappy, entered the apartment about 90 minutes after the mayor arrived, just before 7 o'clock. Minutes later, this camera spotted Vappy in different clothes, watering plants on the balcony. While Vappy spent much of that evening with the mayor at the apartment, 2 additional officers remained on the clock, being paid to protect the mayor. That day, the mayor had a handful of meetings, 7 in total, although she missed one of them. Vappy and Robert Mondlin claimed they worked 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. Officer Luis Martinez put on his timesheet he worked 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And Orleans Sheriff Deputy Charles Ellis worked 7 a.m. until 7 at night. A total of 48 hours of work for these 4 officers to protect the mayor of New Orleans. But there's more. We also found 2 instances of the mayor bringing police protection on personal trips outside the state. September of 2021, the mayor traveled to Birmingham, Alabama for the funeral of a relative. According to the records, 2 officers, Robert Mondlin and Jeffrey Vappy, accompanied the mayor. They left the afternoon of Thursday, September 23rd and returned the next night. On Thursday, both Vappy and Mondlin billed taxpayers for 16 hours of work, 8 a.m. until midnight. On Friday, Mondlin billed for 12 hours, Vappy 13. While Mondlin went on the clock at 8 a.m., Vappy clocked in at 7. It's unclear what he did for that hour. The funeral didn't start until 11 in the morning.
Why do you need to bring one security guard, much less 2, to a weekend trip for a family event? This is private. This is a personal trip that she went. This wasn't official city business. So why does she need to bring not 1 but 2 of her security detail officers with her to drive her to and from that location?
According to the mayor's calendar, Cantrell has taken several personal trips in the past few years, but the records we received from the city show she only brought security on 2 of them, 2 driving trips to Alabama. The other this past August. Vappy went with the mayor to an event in Montgomery, an event that honored the mayor's cousin. Taxpayers paid for Vappy's hotel room and meals. No expenses for the mayor were covered by the city.
Essentially, what it was a chauffeur driving her from New Orleans to personal family events in Alabama on 2 different occasions. So that was essentially a personal trip that she took that was funded by the city of New Orleans in the form of security driving her to and from those events.
While in some cases the mayor would need protection out of town, the Metropolitan Crime Commission's Rafael Goyeneche says at family functions and award ceremonies, her safety is likely not in jeopardy.
If she's going to a family event, she's not under any risk of being targeted for any type of violence or protest. You have video of her coming and going from the Pontalba building, where she is known in the city of New Orleans and she's walking to and from with no security. So many times in the city of New Orleans, she drives herself around and is not accompanied by security. So what is the point in taking security with her to Alabama for a family funeral or an award ceremony given to a relative?
Back in 2021, on Sunday, September 19th, the mayor had nothing on her calendar. Still, Jeffrey Vappy went on the clock at 7 a.m. and never clocked out, getting paid for 17 straight hours of work. That same day, with no public events on the calendar, the city also paid Robert Monlin for 12 hours of work, 7 a.m. until 7 at night. The next day, September 20th, the city paid 3 security officers. The mayor had a handful of meetings on the calendar, the first at 10 in the morning, the last wrapped up at 4 in the afternoon. Still, Monlin and Charles Ellis both went on the clock at 8 a.m. Ellis worked until 4 in the afternoon, Monlin until 11 at night, which raises even more questions about why another officer was even needed. Remember, Vappy worked 17 straight hours on Sunday, and at midnight says he kept working until 7 a.m. when he went off the clock for an hour. Then clocked back in at 8 a.m. and worked until 11 that night. All totaled on that Monday, Monlin worked 15 hours, Ellis 8, Vappy 22, 45 hours of paid security details, with most of the shifts overlapping. To the head of the Metropolitan Crime Commission, a clear sign the city needs to do a better job of scheduling security while the mayor is outside the office.
Fox 8 has reached out to Mayor Cantrell's office several times regarding our questions about her schedule and the schedule of her security team. Back in November, Cantrell's communications director sent a statement that reads in part, "While we do not comment on the mayor's executive protection policies and protocols, we do attest to the fact that Officer Vappy and all members of the mayor's executive protection team personify the level of devotion expected and required as a public servant to the city of New Orleans. We acknowledge their sacrifice and honor their service."